Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Just give us 30 seconds or so for a final few people to join, and then we will start. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jay Gullish, and I want to thank you for joining our second session of the U.S.-India Business Council. This is part of our West Coast Digital Week, and the idea is that overall we're looking at ways to develop a U.S.-India strategic digital partnership. And there's no better way at all than to think about quantum technology. It's forward-looking, it's advanced, it's going to be tremendous in various applications. I know I can speak for one of us. We may or may not understand quantum technology and its implications, but we're really excited today to learn from our guests and panelists and speakers about what quantum is, what are the applications, what's the potential, and where does it fit into the U.S.-India technology relationship. One of the very reasons we wanted to talk about quantum technology was during our discussions with 5G, which is sort of the topic du jour. We realized that we should have been talking about 5G with the government of India 5 years ago. And so then rather than waiting for 5 years until 2025, we decided to get ahead of the curve, have an initial conversation, develop a group of interested parties, and going forward, look at opportunities and ways to learn more about quantum and help develop the technology overall. As we go in today, just a few nuts and bolts. First and foremost, I want to ask people if they are not speaking to go on mute. And sometimes people have issues with broadband. Turning off the incoming or outgoing video usually rectifies that situation. After our conversation, we are going to open it up for participation and questions. So do feel free to raise your hand if you're familiar with that button, or to type in the box a question that you would like us to ask the panelists. The way today is structured is we're really pleased. We're going to have a conversation, but prior to that, we're going to have an introduction by the two governments of India and the United States. We're really pleased to have officials that are responsible for coordinating technology policy and programs within their governments, and then we're going to move into an expert panel. Our first speaker today is Dr. Charles Tahan. He's the Associate Director for Quantum and Information Science. He's also the Director of the National Quantum Coordination Office, which is in the White House. It's a fairly new organization. And it's looking to coordinate various quantum programs and research. Dr. Tahan, he's actually on detail from the Laboratory of Physical Sciences, where his research spans computing, telecommunications, sensing, and other device physics, for high-performance computer architecture. He's actually a practicing physicist, and he works at the University of Maryland at College Park, and he's doing original research in quantum information and device theory. Dr. Tahan, he's earned his PhD in physics at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he also studied at the College of William and Mary. He's a was a research fellow at the University of Cambridge. He's also done work in Australia and University of Tokyo in Japan, and he has some private sector experience at Booz Allen Hamilton. Our second speaker today, and we're super pleased to have Shri Sanjeev Varshney from the Government of India. He's advisor and head of international cooperation at the Department of Science and Technology. He's worked at the department since 1990, and he's presently leading the overall division, where he's responsible for facilitating bilateral and multilateral and regional scientific cooperation between India and its partner countries. As such, he's really critical to crafting the science and technology relationship with the United States, and we look forward to his ideas and understanding his actions going forward and how we promote a broader U.S.-India strategic digital partnership, and specifically how does advanced technologies such as quantum fit into that. We're also pleased during our panel section to have Dr. Carl Williams, He's the Deputy Director of Physical Measurement Laboratory at NIST. He is a fellow of the Joint Quantum Institute and the Joint Center for Quantum Information and Computing and Science. He's also an adjacent professor of physics at the University of Maryland. He directs the Quantum Information Program, and he's, as I said, he's very active in NIST, obviously. He studied in Rice University, and he got his PhD from the University of Chicago. He's an associate editor of the Journal of Quantum Information and Computation. He's authored 100 scientific publications, and he's obviously a speaker in international conferences, and we're very pleased to have him here today with us. Also on the panel, we have Ms. Reena Dayal, who's the director of Garage, Microsoft India, where she looks at quantum computing. If you're not familiar with the Microsoft Garage, it's a global company program. It encourages employees to work on projects that they're passionate about, and we're pleased to have her as well. She's also a founding chairperson of the IEEE Special Interest Group on Quantum Computing. She's a founding member of the Cloud Computing Innovation Council of India. She also holds patents, and she authored a book, Innovation Magic and the Science of Art of Innovation Management. She's also a Chevening Fellow. For folks who aren't familiar with the Chevening Fellowship, it's very prestigious. And she did her fellowship at Oxford, and she received her degree at IIT Roorkee. Further, we have Dr. Jeff Wesley. He's Vice President of IBM Research. He's at the Almaden Lab in San Jose, California. The lab, he actually oversees a series of scientists and engineers, and they're looking at exploratory and applied research. The lab has quite a storied history, but today it specializes in areas such as Watson technology, storage systems, data management and analytics, nanotechnology, and material sciences. He and his team are also looking at Web 2.0 technologies and IBM Smart Planet Initiative that's looking at a variety of things such as healthcare informatics, water desalination, and electric car batteries. Previously, Dr. Welser, I guess he joined IBM in 1995 as a fellow IBMer. I appreciate the great work he's doing. He's got a PhD from Stanford University. He owns nearly 24 patents, and he's published over 75 papers and presentations. Further, we have Chris Boyer, who is the Assistant Vice President of Global Public Policy at AT&T. Obviously, we are familiar with AT&T, one of America's largest and oldest telephone companies, but obviously now they're much more diverse into the content fields and onto internet with Warner Media and other activities as well. He's responsible for strategic policy positions. He focuses on cybersecurity, and he's recently been appointed the chairman of the National Institute against NIST, Information Security and Privacy Advisory Board. He also coordinates with AT&T's Chief Security Officer. Chris has a BS from Business Administration from the University of Kansas and an MBA from the University of Houston. The moderated portion will be conducted by Akhilesh Tuteja. Akhilesh, we're really pleased to have him here. He's a partner at KPMG. He focuses on global cybersecurity, where he's advised several hundred clients on these issues, cybersecurity, IT, selection of technology, and so forth. Akhilesh is a frequent contributor to business and technology publications, and he's been very active in India's banking industry. So we really have a wonderful group of folks here to help us demystify the issue of quantum technology, understand some of the practical applications for business, look at the policy environment, and hopefully identify ways to promote quantum engagement or diplomacy between the two nations. So with that, we're going to start our formal program with, I'm going to give the microphone to Dr. Tahan to provide us some introductory remarks, followed by his counterpart from the government of India. Dr. Tahan, the microphone is yours, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Perfectly.
All right, thank you. Again, good morning. Really appreciate the invitation and the warm opening remarks. Quantum information science is first and foremost a foundational science, and it promises new, transformative technologies for computing, sensing, and networking. The United States has invested in quantum for decades across its various funding agencies. But as you know, the U.S. has a federal approach to science funding. Each agency, the National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, National Institute of Standards and Technology, Department of Defense, and the others have their own missions and objectives, which drive the type of research questions they pursue. And while our agencies collaborate in quantum and have been doing so for a long time, about 2 years ago, we took it to another level by forming a subcommittee on quantum information science here at the White House. So the subcommittee sits within the White House National Science and Technology Council, and it pulls together the Office of Science and Technology Policy, where I work, and 13 and growing agencies and offices across the U.S. federal government to help set clear policy goals for quantum information science across the country. This effort led to a 2018 release of a U.S. National Strategic Overview for quantum information science, a set of all government policy goals for the field. Aside from these executive branch activities, Congress also passed the National Quantum Initiative Act, which President Trump signed at the end of 2018. The NQI Act authorized about $1.3 billion to promote QIS R&D initiatives from federal agencies like NSF, DOE, and NIST, and that's in addition to the already core and growing QIS programs across the government. The White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, as legislated by that act, also created the National Quantum Coordination Office. I'm the director of that. And our goal in the NQCO is to help coordinate U.S. federal and public-private coordination in quantum in support of the NQI. So today I just wanted to touch on a few of the key approaches of the national strategy here in the U.S. for quantum information science. First, the United States approach to QIS is science first. And that's really key. This is an emerging science technology field, and taking the science first approach is the right thing to do. So we prioritize a strong investment in basic research, which is needed to enable major technological breakthroughs down the road. And as the discovery space grows, the private sector is also investing in this very nascent but growing and potentially transformative quantum field and resulting technologies. Our goal is to nurture this growing ecosystem of companies and individuals and to fund early discovery, support the talent necessary to grow the base of ideas, and to build a supply chain to make future economically useful quantum technologies a reality for our society. One way to do that is by leveraging the Quantum Economic Development Consortium, which is a nonprofit industry body launched by the National Institute of Standards and Technology within our Department of Commerce. Its goal is to grow a robust commercial quantum industry and the necessary supply chain for these new technologies as they develop. Another key element of the U.S. strategy is to develop the workforce that a growing QIS sector will need. Quantum information is a very multidisciplinary field and requires deep expertise. And we anticipate a lot of exciting and important scientific advances across the quantum landscape. But we also know that these advances will take years and even decades to be realized. As things progress from scientific insight to technologies to economic advantage, we must ensure a robust workforce to enable this. This is a really broad horizon, so we are thinking about ways to support and develop faculty and graduate students, as well as undergraduates and high school students, and even younger future entrepreneurs, scientists, and engineers. The last pillar of the U.S. approach that I want to highlight today, and is particularly relevant to this discussion, is a major goal of ours is to pursue international cooperation. where it makes sense to do so. Quantum is a very global field. It has been since the early days, and international cooperation is critical to not only accelerating discovery, but also workforce development and growing this marketplace of this very nascent new industry. Quantum is poised to be incredibly transformative, and as we look to identify opportunities for deeper coordination, it is important for countries that value the foundational values of scientific integrity, a safe research environment, openness and reciprocity, and so on, to reaffirm these mutually held values as a prelude to enhanced good faith partnerships. Quantum is among the most important emerging technologies for the future, and it will be great to hear from today's speakers. And I'm particularly interested in India's approach to quantum information national policy for advancing this technology. And I hope we can continue our discussions between the US and India to see where we can work more closely together. So I'll pass it off to the next speaker and just say I'm really excited about today's discussion and further discussions about quantum.
Great, thank you, sir. I really appreciate that overview of the U.S. approach and how we're looking forward as a country and how your office is looking to coordinate across the various agencies. With that, we're super pleased to have, Shri Sanjeev Varshney. He, as I mentioned, he's the advisor and head of international cooperation at the Department of Science and Technology. I am always impressed by scientists in India, and we're really happy to have you today, sir. You're on mute. If you want to unmute, that would be great. And share with us a little bit about how India is looking at quantum technology and how your office is looking to also coordinate and promote it. So with that, sir, the microphone is yours. Sir, you're on mute if you want to unmute yourself. While we're waiting, Mr. Varshney, you're on mute if you want to unmute yourself. While we're waiting, Dr. Tahan, I'm going to ask you a question while we're waiting for Mr. Varshney to come back online. So one of the issues here, you mentioned international cooperation. Why do you think a country like India would be important to the United States to understand and work together? I mean, you say it's very global. Is there something particular about India that makes it different from our other friends and allies?
Sorry, there's a huge delay to unmuting. So to answer your question, based on 20 years of working in this field in quantum computing and in my position now in policy, I think the short answer is we can move faster together. Quantum requires a large pool of talent and ideas, and one of our biggest policy objectives is to grow that pool of talent, grow that marketplace of ideas and industry. And to do that, you need to partner with, countries who share similar values to you. And, India, I can't think of another partner. India is a great example of a comparable country in terms of how we value scientific integrity and the scientific process. And so I think for those reasons, continue to work together, first and foremost, to move faster, to discover the new science is critical.
Right. And aside from quantum, do you have other positive experiences of working with India in various science and technology realms, and hence that they are translatable to, the quantum arena?
Well, as you know, there are many colleagues who work in quantum from India, but in U.S. universities and schools and as professors, and many people who have gone back to India to set up their own quantum research groups. And I've had many fruitful technical exchanges and collaborations with people. So I think there are almost too many things to name. It's about having more people working on the right problems. right? So if we can expand that pool, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, thank you. From our conversation yesterday, one of the key issues that came up was trust building, that the need for trust between strategic allies and partners, and that the United States and India have been building that trust, and certainly in an area such as quantum technology, one would think that that trust factor has a very important element to it. Let's see if we can't get Dr. Varshney back on the line, sir. If you're able to hear us, can you? Yes,
so what has
please
happened is I think his system has crashed, so he's trying to log in through phone, and once he's done, I think he's here. Just a second.
Okay.
Yeah. No, so he's trying to log in through his phone, and then once he's here, then.
Okay, great. Yeah. So in the meantime, why don't we toggle to the, thank you for your flexibility due to these technical difficulties. So let me hand it over to Akhilesh to start the process of pulling in the panelists. And then when Mr. Varshney comes, we'll stop there and we'll pull him in. So with that, Akhilesh, if you want to just sort of set the ground rules, what issues you want to talk about, and just apologize in advance that we'll toggle back to the intro. Hello, Mr. Varshney, is that you, sir?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Some system.
No worries. We're glad to have you here. If you could just please begin your introductory remarks, and we'll and then I'll follow up with a question for you, and then we'll toggle over to the panel.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here. Good morning to everyone in the United States. We have recently started our quantum program, and as you know, that frontier area of quantum system one developed by physics, chemistry, computer science, mathematics, and information theory. And as my previous speaker mentioned, that there is a lot of emphasis on science. So what we are trying to do is that we are trying to put a lot of emphasis on this, and we have identified 4 major objectives of Indian quantum programs, and that would be development and demonstration of quantum computers, development and demonstration of quantum communication and crypto, development of quantum enhanced and inspired technologies, and development of mathematical quantum techniques, algorithm, and theory of quantum information science. And how we are going to address it. So various thematic area which we have identified is quantum information technology with photonic devices, quantum information technology with solid state, heterogeneous vacancy, and magnetic resonance, quantum information technology with ion trap and optical lattice devices, with quantum information technology with superconducting qubit devices and quantum dot devices, and mathematical and fundamental aspect of quantum computation and information. And what are our targeted goals? We are focused to develop and design quantum register, 4-qubit quantum computer initially, possibility to scale up number of qubits, gate implementation and quantum algorithm realization, 4-qubit quantum entangled states, generation of entangled states between 2 locations, multi-party entanglement generation, detection and quantification, decoherence effect on entanglement generation, development of methods to overcome the same, and demonstration of quantum teleportation, remote separation, quantum dense coating, and final demonstration of quantum key generation between location and its security analysis. Now, this is in a nutshell broadly about the quantum which we have launched from Department of Science and Technology, along with our sister department, Ministry of Information and Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. And what we're trying to do is between India and US that there are number of networking center already in place. We have an organization, many of you may be aware, Indo-US Science and Technology Forum, which has provided us network, so we can cap on that and we can connect Indian and US laboratories to work together. For this purpose, DST has already initiated dialogue with National Science Foundation, and we are very hopeful that we could take on research collaboration between India and US in near future. And for this purpose, I would propose if we could organize a virtual meeting of Indian and American stakeholders. So that may be the starting pitch on which we can do further. And I'm sorry, my presentation I can't share with you, but I try to give you my feelings about it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, so I asked Dr. Tahan the same question, and is the United States uniquely positioned to work with India? When I asked Dr. Tahan the inverse question on India, he said there's too many reasons to mention, but he went in to mention a couple of very important ones. One is the importance of Indian Americans as well as Indians in academia, and he also mentioned the technology, just wherewithal overall from India in terms of skilling and resources. From your point of view, does your global interaction on quantum, how does the United States fit in? Is it unique? Is it different? Or is it part of a larger global community of which you want to work with?
In fact, we have started making this dialogue with some of the select countries, which includes US, UK, Germany, Japan. So we would like to start with them, and then slowly we will see how we could go further. India attaches huge importance to US because, you know, it's a natural between Indian and American researchers. And we have one of the strong scientific collaboration program with United States.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So we're going to move to the conversation part of this. I would welcome both of our introductory speakers to stay on and jump in or ask any questions. Again, the focus is how do we start the process of engaging together. So Akhilesh, the microphone and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Jay, for that lovely context setting and the introduction of all those wonderful experts which you got today here. I can't tell you how delighted I am to be part of this fascinating panel discussion. Before I get into the detail, I do want to kind of assure some of the people like me on the conversation that if you only got about 20% of what Mr. Varshney said, I think you're getting it. If you got anything more than 20%, I think you're already an expert in my opinion. But as they say about quantum, that the more you get confused about it, the more you seem to be getting it. Before I get into the real meat of the discussion, which I want to explore today on two parts. One is what's the value of quantum for us as a business technology? Of course, it's great foundational technology, as Dr. Tahan said, and most of the business technologies are built on the top of foundational technology, but I will focus on how important is it to the business. But the second thing which I'll explore saying how can the two countries like US and India work together, and I really like the point which Dr. Tahan made is that we can develop it faster together. So I think that's something which is a great inspirational thing for me. But before I jump into the real details and invite all the experts which I have the real privilege of being here today with, I just want to give you a little bit of glimpse of what quantum is. And of course, I'm not a quantum expert, but I do want to tell you a little bit about what I think as a relatively less evolved person about quantum. So the first one for me is if you look at quantum, quantum is cool. And that's what I wrote in my LinkedIn update today. Yes, to make a quantum computer work, you have to work at a really low temperature. So it's certainly cool. And what we would like to deal quantum to me feels like God, which is, as we say in Hindu mythology, it's there everywhere, but you really can't understand it. So I think it's another thing, it's all pervasive. We're dealing with this, but it's super hard for us to understand. And those who understand quantum, and all the people here on the panel today, which are, I think they're close to God in some ways, in my view. And the third one, which I want to tell you, this is my personal experience, is while quantum makes big leaps happen, it can make lots of big things happen. But to someone like me, quantum makes you humble. And why I say that quantum makes you humble is because as a KPMG consultant for many, many years, I used to tell my team saying that you throw any subject on me as a panel discussion, I can just wake up the morning and just talk about it and get people to talk about it. But I think I made a mistake because they brought me into this panel on quantum. And only about 2 days ago, I said, oh, I got to talk about it. I can't tell you how hard I've been working on just catching up, because the last time I actually wrote a paper on quantum, because I also deal with crypto analysis and cryptography in my cyber role, in just about 2 years, tons of things have changed. So I have been at it, reading a lot of stuff from people like Dr. Williams, Jeff, and many others. So I must tell you, it started to make me feel humble that it is something which we just can't take it. And to me, that answer is that I'm stopping to use the term saying that we are not dealing with rocket science. Next time, anything I have to refer to, I'll say that we are not dealing with quantum physics, because to me, it's like closer to the rocket science. But having said all of that, I think I really want to divide our conversation for the next 30, 40 minutes into broadly 4 or 5 types of areas I would like to explore. The first area which I would like to explore is experts to talk to us in a little bit about what quantum is in very simple things. So I'll kind of just explore quantum a little bit, or quantum computing if I were to get focused on. The second thing which I want to talk about is what are the real world applications as we see today? Because I'm sure there are huge applications when it comes to healthcare, cryptography, cybersecurity, distance, many other things that are huge. So I would like to explore what we think are the real here and now. Of course, there's nothing here and now, but something which will work together forward. That's the second aspect I would like to explore on what should we think about as the good use cases. Thereon, I want to move on to talk about how do we make the development happen faster. So as the representative from both US and India talked about that, we need to collaborate and all that, but what all do we need to do to move faster? And I really don't want Jay to feel as disappointed as he felt about 5G, that we will really be in it ahead of time. And the fourth thing which I want to explore is what are the challenges which one can really anticipate right now. I'm sure there are many, many of those, but a community like USIBC can facilitate. I'm sure it's a multi-agency, multilateral dialogue, but more than that, getting the right people on the table, having the right kind of discussion. So those would be the 4 kinds of segment I would like to explore. So with that, I'm going to start with the first one, what quantum is. And I'm going to start with my first question is going to be to Jeff, to you. And the question is relatively easy but tough. If you were to describe quantum to my 13-year-old, how will you describe quantum computing to her?
Thanks very much. So I think if I was going to describe quantum to your 13-year-old, I would say, think about a computing program that's massively parallel, ability to do massive numbers of computations at once, if you can find the right way, the right problem and the right way to map that problem onto it. So if you're trying to do chemical simulations, for example, and mapping that kind of thing onto it, it can do it much faster than it could any other way. I'm sorry, I've got something going on, a bit of an emergency. I need to go off for a second. Sorry.
Sure. So while you come back to us, let me ask the same question to Dr. Williams. What would be your, how would you describe quantum to a 13-year-old?
So I think I start by saying that in some ways, we call this the second quantum revolution. And then the first quantum revolution is all around us. You don't have transistors without quantum mechanics. You don't have lasers without quantum mechanics. And, lasers and transistors are in everything we build today. But those are the easy pieces of quantum mechanics, the so-called semi-classical pieces, the pieces we can explain more or less readily to a 13-year-old. Now we want to go take the pieces that are really far more complexes. And the way I like to often tell people is, these are the pieces, most people understand how brilliant Einstein was. But Einstein spent most of his life trying to prove quantum mechanics incomplete. And the reason is because of these stranger properties. And these stranger properties is what gives power to this device. It's what allows us to do things beyond what we can do with this quantum 1.0 technology. And so it really is transformative, and it is odd. But you can demonstrate it in some very simple ways to young children that this is the way the world is. It's kind of magic, because in some ways that's how it appears. But that is what quantum 2.0 is. It is very, very strange things, but today it is a theory that describes how the microscopic world works. And we know this very, very accurately. So if you don't understand it, feel good. You have just joined Einstein.
That's a lovely compliment. I think I'll certainly start to believe in that one. But thank you so much. I think that was a great answer. Let me turn to Reena. And Reena, as a consultant, I can always make it harder. So I'm changing my question now. So it's not about explaining it to a 13-year-old. How would you explain quantum to a CEO? If you were to kind of describe quantum to a CEO, what would be kind of your articulation about that?
Yeah, so I guess I describe it the way I've usually been describing it to some of the senior leaders, is that when you imagine yourself at the beginning of the compute revolution, where the first mainframes were coming up, right? And you were thinking, okay, this is a new way of actually doing computation, right? And imagine at that time how many people thought that, we don't know what this will scale to. If somebody had said that computation will be in your hand one day, nobody would have believed it at that time, because you would spend hours doing paperwork for computation to happen. And that computation revolution that came in this world was based on classical physics. And today what we are seeing is a mechanism. We are going back to what Richard Feynman had said, and said that there is a possibility to do computation based on quantum mechanics. So we are now looking at a different angle of physics, looking at how the miniature world works, and thinking of computation which is much more powerful than classical computation, which is going to solve some of the problems which are today considered unsolvable. And we are going to base a series of devices and computation machinery which is based on elements of quantum physics. So if you abstract everything out, computation could be based on anything. You could have biological computing. You could have computation based on chemical reactions. As long as you can define the unit of computation, you can build an abstraction on top of it, and you have a whole series of computations. Today, the quantum computational mechanism seems like the most viable and most powerful mechanism for us to solve some of the most difficult problems that we face today. And as Carl Williams pointed out, is that when you look at some of the phenomena like superposition and entanglement, which are core to quantum physics, and you build a computational system on top of that, you get quantum computing. So if you're thinking that this is computation in the future and far into the future, then remember how quickly the computational machinery evolved on this planet, and then remember how quickly the internet as we know evolved, right? And we're going to see the same in the quantum space as well. So that's my explanation to the CEO.
That's an absolutely optimistic and a fancy note. The world is closer than what we can imagine in the future, so that's good. Let me turn to our fourth panelist today, Chris. We don't have it on video, I guess. Same question to you, Chris. How do you describe quantum computing to a business leader or a CEO?
Well, I think first off, thanks for having me here today. My video should be coming through. Are you guys seeing me okay, or is it not coming?
Yes, you can see you now.
All right, I was just checking. Yeah, no. So I want to start with just by kind of building off what Reena said. When people think of quantum, they don't necessarily think of AT&T first, right? But I think for me, I'm not an engineer or a physicist, so I'm kind of at the low end of the totem pole with this particular panel. But I think what I'd like to talk a little bit about is like, why does it matter, right? So if I was talking to a CEO at AT&T, it would be, why is quantum relevant to AT&T? Because folks don't necessarily think of us traditionally in that role. And I think the where it matters for us is if you look at networks over the years, traditionally we've built networks to keep up with capacity, leveraging what we call Moore's law, right? So it's basically the idea that the processing power doubles every other year, and then we can continually build networks based upon throwing of basically physical appliances, against the network. So we used to build networks by just adding processing capability and power with physical devices. And in recent years, we've seen that we've made a kind of fundamental shift that we're starting to see such an increase in bandwidth as more and more of our users move to things like video and other types of content over the internet, that now we've shifted from kind of using physical appliances for keeping up with the demand to moving more towards what we call software-defined networking. So this is the idea of combining more sophisticated software, virtual appliances, or turning those appliances into virtual instances that run on software in the cloud as a way to really keep up with the demand. And then where quantum comes into play, at least from us on the application side, it's basically where we're going to need to be 10 years out into the future, right? So if you look at the trajectory that we're on, the demand on the network is going to continue to increase at such a rate that even with the optimization that we can get from leveraging software and software-defined networking and virtualization, at some point the runway room on that will ultimately be stressed just by the sheer increase in capacity or sheer increase in demand. And so quantum becomes a vehicle for us to leverage these new technologies as a way to keep up with the demand. So to me, so if I was talking to my CEO, that would be like, why does quantum matter to AT&T or anybody in the communications industry? I think that's really where it comes into play, is as we build out kind of a quantum internet, which is kind of the future. And I don't know what the time horizon is. Others on the call may have a better opinion on that. But when we get to that stage, and as we see the demand and the capacity needs continue to grow, quantum becomes a tool that we'll need to leverage to try to keep up with that demand and have smart networks that can deal with the capacity challenges.
Fascinating. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. I think I can explain it to my CEO as well now as to how we should be investing in some of these things. So let me come back to Carl here again on the real world practical implications. And again, I'm not forcing to say when does it happen, but if you were to look at today, which are the areas which you think are most likely to get impacted in the nearest future, and what are the kinds of application we should be talking about when it comes to quantum?
So coming from NIST, which is a National Measurement Institute, I always talk about the power of one quantum bit, and one quantum bit is what we call an atomic clock. And everybody uses this today. I mean, people have GPS. They get in their cars. They put on Google Maps. They go wherever they want to go, and everything else. You're using special relativity, general relativity, and you're tying to some of the best clocks that have ever been developed. I start with the clocks because it is far easier to control a single quantum bit than a million. And so the sensing area is probably one of the earliest, and it is out there, and the techniques are there. I think as we go forward and you start looking at where the first applications, it's going to be some of the applications of the technologies to classical devices. That is building better detectors and sensors for doing imaging, perhaps for biomedical research, other things. So it's going to take years to roll this technology out, very much along the lines that Reena described, in that you don't end up with the most powerful quantum computer on day one. It is kind of the end of the process, and so the same with the network. So there's going to be a structured layout as we come, and what's really surprising about this is we don't fully comprehend all the things one might do in the quantum world. So the most important application, even in the near term, the most important application has probably not been thought of, and may actually be thought of by your 13-year-old daughter. So it is really an open field. This is why we're taking a science-first approach in the U.S. But I think we can speculate and we can point to some of the real home runs that we know that are out there. But I don't think anybody can look for 30, 40 years into the future and determine exactly how much impact this technology is going to have. Great question.
Thank you so much, and gives me huge confidence. I always tell that the Moore's law applies not just to the computers, it also applies to humans, maybe not at the same speed, but I always tell that my next generation is smarter than what I was, and I'm sure that's the case with everybody else. So I certainly have a huge, not just the hope, but confidence that my 13-year-old will figure it out sooner than I will ever do. So I think that's fantastic. On your thought about the one quantum bit versus the million, there's one thing which I have been always fascinated with is the games. And I remember my favorite game used to be Super Mario, but another one was Pac-Man, and it was built on 8-bit, the classical binary bits. And when you get to the level 256, the life just went haywire. So I just hope that the games which we hopefully build someday on the quantum qubits and all that will go many, many multi-million levels than what Pac-Man ever did.
Well, I actually think that's great, because I sometimes tell people when the quantum processor will fit in something like an iPhone and you have quantum networks and everything else, one of the multi-billion-dollar markets is going to be quantum games. Why? I can create correlated randomness to ensure that a game never plays the same way twice,
Predictable.
which really is equitable to everybody who's playing it. And so I think that's coming too, if we can actually drive the technology to that standpoint.
I must tell you, that was a little bit of research on you, so that's where I got the game thinking. Okay, let me bring Dr. Tahan into the conversation here, because I was fascinated the way he talked about the foundational thing, and also he talked about the science first. Dr. Tahan, while you are looking at this as a foundational science, but anything which you think are the maximum impacted segments of business, society, or other things which you think would have the biggest impact to start with? I think it's the unmute delay, I guess. But if you are not getting Dr. Tahan, let me turn to Reena. Reena, what's your take on this one?
Sorry. Yep.
So as usual, I'm the more optimistic. I'm a diehard quantum believer. So my answer is going to be that, yes, we do not have a scalable quantum computer today on this world, and that is going to take some time for solutions to run on that. But practically, I also am very deeply aware that anything that runs on a quantum computer will not make classical computing obsolete. In fact, the way we envision it in the industry is that both classical and quantum computing will work side by side. In fact, the stacks will work together for any application to sit on top of that. And if I talk about the here and now in terms of what's happening today, there are problems that are getting solved today based on quantum algorithms, quantum technology. Sensing is a good area, that Mr. Williams already talked about. But there is also an area which is known as optimization, where if you look at certain optimization problems which cannot be solved using classical techniques, you can use quantum algorithms which run on a simulated environment or on an existing small number of qubits based quantum computer, and solve those problems in a much more efficient and in a much more time-bound manner, right? So we are seeing those applications even today, and these applications tend to be in the area of quantum chemistry, which means wherever you're looking at analyzing at the low level. It's also very applicable to imaging and sensing, where you want to optimize certain aspects associated with imaging, especially in the medical imaging area. So we are seeing some of those applications actually happening right now. And hence, the intent is to look at quantum development in two phases. One is this search for the highly scalable quantum computer with thousands of qubits, and then this approach where we can use the aspects of quantum physics and quantum inspired, which can be solving some of the difficult problems today. So that's my viewpoint.
That's interesting. I like your optimism always. I'll come to you if I anyway feel down. Chris, I'm going to come to you now. Although you stole my line saying that you're the one who's actually reducing the average wisdom of the group, I thought I was the one who was lowering that. But let me make it in a manner that I sound a little bit more intelligent than I actually is about the subject. So I've learned that quantum computers can solve NP-complete type of problems. Quantum computer can solve the longest path problems and all of that. So very complicated things, which of course many of us don't need to worry about, leave it to scientists. But if imagine you had the power to really decide what applications you would like to put it to first of any business problems or any particular kind of segment of problem, what is your wish list of the kind of things you would like such a powerful technology to solve?
Oh, wow, that's a tough question to answer, right? I mean, there's so many different problems that could be put against that. You know, our business is fundamentally in the networking business, so certainly use it in the application that I mentioned earlier of how to deal with kind of changes in network capacity and, you know, and basically powering. I think of quantum as being somewhat interrelated with AI and things like 5G, right? They're a similar set of technologies. So the idea that you could use quantum as a, you know, to support artificial intelligence to build autonomous networks. I mean, that's kind of the vision of the future, right, for the industry. So what you would use that against, you know, certainly for security, right? So we have a team inside AT&T that's doing a lot of research on the application of quantum in security, because there's the opportunity there to have even more granular, you know, AI and you can have, you know, with autonomous networks, you can have, you can basically apply security controls at much greater speed, leveraging that enhanced intelligence to identify threats as they occur. So there's a lot of research going on in those types of areas. So I could certainly see an application for quantum in the security field. That's an area that I spend a lot of my time working on, but certainly there's other applications as well, but that's one that immediately comes to mind.
That's yeah.
So Akhilesh, I do want to make a clarification.
If
When
it
I
was
talked
about
about optimism,
if it was about
I don't want to, I
Yeah,
don't want the
I think-
audience to go back with the impression that we're talking about the future. I'm giving you concrete examples of actual solutions that have been, whatever I spoke about are solutions that have happened today. So for example, Microsoft and Case Western University have actually worked on reducing the time that it takes to do an MRI scan using quantum optimized algorithms, right? So this is not something which we're talking about the future. This is happening today. The same is happening on the chemistry side. There is a huge amount of promise that is there on the drug discovery side, which is, you know, where a series of experiments are happening, not just by Microsoft, but many of our industry counterparts, other companies, our competitors, and so on, right? So I think it's fair to call this out so that the audience is fully aware of what's happening today, that this is the here and now. And yes, I do continue to be optimistic because I'm seeing things happen at a very rapid rate. So my optimism is based on the scientific examination of the past, of how classical computing moved forward, and even today as how I'm seeing quantum move forward faster than we had anticipated, right? So just that clarification for the benefit of the audience.
No, thank you so much for
Charlie.
here.
Can I add a little bit to that?
Yes, please come in, sir.
Sure.
Yeah. So I just want to add. I was going to say the same thing that you did. That, you know, one of the most near-term applications for quantum information science are actually classical algorithms that have been discovered only because people are thinking about quantum algorithms and what you could run on a quantum computer. So taking a fresh look at machine learning and optimization and chemistry from the context of, you know, if we had a quantum computer, has resulted in new types of algorithms that will work on a classical computer. And in a sense, it's a bit discouraging because we don't need the quantum computer anymore for some of these things. But it's greatly impactful because it gives us a whole new look and a new applications for classical computers that we would not have found otherwise. And it motivates continued investment in the talent and the people who understand how to do quantum algorithms. So that's just another way of saying, you know, what you were just saying, that one of the most exciting near-term applications are these quantum-inspired classical algorithms that run on normal computers, but would only have been found because we've taken this path, you know, this of trying to understand quantum science.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Han and Reena. I love the clarification, and I also kind of come in here with my experience. While I may not sound as expert, I'm working with a couple of clients on using quantum for cryptanalysis, and we're using it for quantum key distribution models. This is the applications are again in the banking technology, where you can first generate a huge number of keys at a super speed, and therefore reduce the chances of it getting compromised because of the speed with which you generate and the volume. So Reena, thank you so much. Quantum is here and now. And Dr. Han, we point about how is quantum inspiring us to build algorithm which will work on classical computers. But I still do believe that we won't stop the search for that quantum computers, and we will use those. So I think I kind of really like it. Thank you so much for bringing that thing. On the part of the medical science, healthcare, that's not the subject which I specialize in. I'm more in the business side of it and also on the crypto side of it. I do believe, and this is something which I was kind of talking to some of my friends, is some of us felt when COVID-19 hit us, and many people said that while it's a very bad thing to have happened, but good it happened when we have such great communication technology. And we can all talk to each other with this Microsoft Teams and any other kind of platform. What if it had happened when such technology didn't exist? And I said that every bad thing is bad to happen, whatever is the time. There's never a good time for bad things to happen. If at all it had happened after quantum computers were there in place, and hopefully we could have discovered the vaccine maybe sooner. I'm not an expert, but I'm just adding to the optimism of how some of these things, super fast computing simulations, which can. Yes, Dr. Williams, over to you.
Yeah, I actually think this is a very bright future too. I think the future of where we can go in, and there have been a number of people talking about what is the future of computing, and it isn't just quantum computing. So you do some low-level machine learning to figure out what kind of compounds I might want to go design. And then I do some higher-level classical machine learning, a deep AI, and I come up with these 5 or 6 potential vaccines that may work. And then I pass it off to the quantum computer where I go do that calculation. And you feed it back in and everything else. So the future of the world is very, very bright. I think this technology, I like to describe the technology as being what we believe we can do at everyday energy and time levels. So what physics allows us to build is based on quantum mechanics. And therefore, the quantum computer is the ultimate, and the quantum networks are the ultimate in capabilities that we are going to be given. How we use them, and the most important applications abroad, but it will revolutionize not only the design of drugs, but also perhaps the whole imaging, which has come up, and everything else. So the application of this technology, from basic understanding of science to exploring the universe, to drug design, to perhaps the detection of earthquakes prior to them happening, is absolutely remarkable. It is really an exciting period of time.
Interesting. I think I just can't realize that the time is running so fast. I wish I had the ability to control it. I have too many things to discuss, but I'm conscious of everybody's time. So if everyone is okay to go 10 minutes over, I know we're kind of scheduled to end now, but is it okay if we go 10 minutes over? Okay, all right, thank you. So I want to kind of skip through some of the things and get to 2 important dimensions. So one is, how can we help progress the development and adoption of some of these here and now technologies which you talked about, Reena? How can a USIBC kind of a construct or a community or an interest group could help? Any thoughts around that as to how has the global collaboration on a subject like this could be helpful to the wider community? Sometimes I think these are just the simple issue of awareness. As you mentioned that people may not even know about it, but what else can a community like this do to help expedite the process?
So is that a question to me?
Anybody can answer that. I just don't want to. Yeah.
So yes. I'm happy to give a perspective on this. I think there's a lot of things. I mean, the exchange of people is very good because it spreads knowledge, and people come in and learn expertise from others. I think there's a broader thing that can be done as well, and that is when you look at the kind of supply chain it takes to build any modern sophisticated technology, whether you're talking about the networks that run our current internet to our smartphones to other devices, that supply chain is global. And it takes lots of components and pieces to make that work. And so part of the early engagement with business and everything else is, I can't go build that next quantum computer unless I have better cryogenics, better microwave systems, optical control. So let's begin building some of that, what I will call supporting technology, because I'm going when it gets time to build that all-powerful quantum computer, I'm going to need a lot of component technology that's not there. And in the meantime, by building that, I want to allow the research that's going on in our universities and in our national labs and at important companies to move faster. So let's figure out how we can help build out a new supply chain, the supply chain that's going to support quantum technologies. And we know what some of those things are. We're beginning to look at it. This is part of the things that's going on in the Quantum Economic Development Consortium, but that is a step forward. And that's something we can do jointly.
You know, if I might be able to pick up on Carl, your point about the global theme. You know, last year I had the opportunity to go on a tour of Fermi National Laboratory in Chicago with AT&T's former CEO, and we walked through the quantum research lab there, and I was struck by, you know, how many of the researchers there came from different parts of the world, right? They had flags in the building identifying the researchers that were, and they were from all over the world, really. And so I think one of the key things is just keeping in mind that this is going to require a real partnership between, you know, with the U.S. and all of our allies and other countries and academia and the private sector and companies like all of ours that are investing in the technology. I think that's a key thing that governments can learn, and maybe it's important as much as, you know, there's always discussions about how more funding and R&D research, other things can be, and other resources can be put against that. And I know the U.S. has kind of started that with the legislation that was mentioned earlier that was passed and the National Quantum Initiative that's been launched. But I think ultimately it's going to require a partnership from, you know, the U.S. and a lot of other countries. So I would just put that in people's minds that that's an area that, particularly between the U.S. and India, that we ought to continue to explore.
Thank you. Let me invite Mr. Varshney, if he's still on the line. Mr. Varshney, what do you think, again, looking at how India has progressed into many things, working with many governments, but especially the US, that partnership I've seen has worked very well in the past. What's your recommendation, suggestion? Do we need to do anything different? Do we need to continue to build on this platform further? Do we need to create another multi-stakeholder conversation? What is your suggestion or recommendation?
Our partnership is quite unique. This is one of those partnerships which is not government driven, let me tell you very frankly, because we have serious corporate interest, we have serious individual interest. There are many Indians whose children are studying in US, and altogether there is a very, very different kind of relationship what we enjoy between India and US. So what the government may be doing is just a tip on the iceberg, but we value the collaboration, and we would like to increase the channels, whatever it comes. So in not only quantum, but any field of technology cooperation, which is open, and we would like to work together. We would like, what we are looking for is anything which is affordable to Indian society, providing solutions at affordable prices. So we are looking for new solutions, high-tech solutions, and we would like to facilitate in whatever limited way government can do. But we are open to these suggestions, and we would like to go further. And we have been talking to several stakeholders, including in the State Department, Office of Science and Technology, NSF, and other players.
Thank you, Mr. Varshney. I think the dimension which you talk about is the India-US collaboration at an individual level, given each one of us have kind of interest around. I think that's a unique way to kind of tap into. And I know in this subject, as much as research is required at this level, but also required at the academic institution level and those areas. So I think that's fascinating. I know Jay put in the chat that he's going to take a final question and close, but I just want to take one question, which is a personal interest to me. A lot of business community has been potentially working, I would say, under some sort of anticipated anxiety to say that once quantum computers become really commercially available, all kinds of encryption which we live in today will be broken in no time. And I really want to hear the expert's opinion on this one. So do you really think that as a serious risk? And do you think we are living under challenge, or is it something which the time will solve and there are various methods which will come to overcome it. Any responses from anybody on today's cryptography and its potential threat quantum computing offers to that?
Okay.
So at NIST, NIST has been working to come up with what are called post-quantum crypto or quantum-resistant crypto algorithms, and we're rushing to do this in part to ensure that we can replace the crypto. I think there is mathematics out there that, and these are classical algorithms that come up with new public key infrastructure that is robust against quantum attacks. And so I think it's something we have to do, but I don't see it as any real risk. I think they will be drop-ins to many things. They will probably be a little more computationally intensive, but our computers have gotten more powerful.
Reena, you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, so I agree. I think there is already a huge amount of work happening in this space. There are algorithms that exist today which are not breakable by the quantum computer. So the challenge is more about making sure that we're looking at different aspects. You know, we build the security practices in the world over a period of time, and there's data at rest, there's data in motion. Then there are layerings to this data, and how do you sort of address each aspect of where data is residing and how it is getting shared. But it's happening, and it's happening before the scalable quantum computer is there. So I feel quite confident, as Carl Williams said, that this will be taken care of.
In the interest of time, I would like to hand it back to Jay. But before I do that, I do want to add my personal thank you to all of you. I truly enjoyed it. I can't tell you that how much I've learned today. I'm sure so have the audiences, but I'll hand it back to Jay.
Well, thank you very much. There were two final questions that I just want to pose to the group. One, are there any programs, IITs or IIMs in India that we should be aware of that are doing research from our Indian colleagues, just to sort of let this community know?
IIT and IIMs are not directly involved, but IITs are, and we are providing these programs, and all academic program, corporate programs, and academic corporate program. That is what we would be interested to develop.
Great, thank you. One other thing, and I have to apologize, this is my personal passion influencing the conversation. The United States and India both have been exploring Mars. We've sent explorers there, and presumably in the near future we'll be sending actual people. Does something like a quantum network, or would that allow real-time communications, within the solar system, or would we still have the sort of normal delay that we would have with the basic, laser communications?
No, unfortunately, physics still applies. Speed of light is the limit.
Okay.
But you can imagine using quantum sensors to have something useful on Mars. Maybe for charting gravity or whatever.
Right. Too much Star Trek, I suppose. So with that, I really just want to thank our guests. I want to do a quick summary. A couple of things that really touched me today as I was listening. One is that we think that, quantum is the future, but what we're hearing is it's actually today. And so that just sort of reinforces this idea that maybe we should have been talking about quantum 5 years ago as well, similar to that 5G kind of example that we raised. And so then I think we're in a really good point of time right here. I am going to ask everyone on this call, if you have any ideas, any suggestions about how USIBC and the Chamber of Commerce can move this conversation forward, facilitate interaction between stakeholders on both sides, or even the US and India within a larger global community, please reach out to us. We're happy to help. The second thing that I really heard was that we need to focus on sort of supply chains, ecosystems, and supporting technology, and that each incremental add helps the overall community. And then the last thing I thought was really interesting is that this is not government driven per se, that we're following the science. and I'd be really curious to know and maybe propose that there are some U.S.-India engagements that are more scientific focused. For example, the Nehru Fulbright Scholarship Foundation or the U.S.-India Science and Technology Foundation. Maybe there's an opportunity to insert 5G there. With that, our initial objectives were to learn a little bit. I'm not sure I can explain this to my 13-year-old, but as a 50-year-old, I feel a little bit better that at least like Einstein, I don't quite get it, but I at least see glimpses of it. I want to thank all of our speakers and guests and the participants here today, as I think we had a very valuable conversation adding into the U.S.-India strategic partnership idea. We hope that quantum continues. Let me thank our guests, Shri Varshney, Dr. Tahan, Chris Boyle, Reena, thank you so much. Dr. Williams, really appreciate your insights. And we can thank Jeff as well, but he had to leave with a family emergency. We hope everything's okay. With that, I want to thank everybody for participating in our second session of the U.S.-India West Coast Digital Week. We still have, believe it or not, 4, possibly 5 more sessions. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about AI in the agricultural sector. On Thursday, we have 2 sessions, one on energy and ICT, as well as a 5G conversation. And then on Monday, we're going to be talking about e-commerce regulations. And then hopefully a week from today, or maybe tomorrow, we're going to have a workshop, a conversation on esports. It's sort of a new segment within media and entertainment that's obviously, given COVID, how much time people have at home, we'd like to bring that topic forward as well. So with that, on behalf of myself, my colleagues, Abhishek Kishore, Aditya Vashisa, and the others at USIBC behind the scenes, thank you all. I want to thank our members for making this happen, and I want to thank, in particular, our speakers today for providing some insight and understanding on this really fascinating topic. So with that, I bid everyone a good night and a good afternoon here in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.